Okay, so welcome to episode 4 of the Cinema 4D for Beginners series. So today I'm just going to go over some basic lighting. So yeah, if you guys are new to the channel, be sure to check out the rest of the series. It's going to be on a playlist you can find on my channel. And yeah, I guess we'll just get right into it. So today I'm going to be talking about lighting. In the first couple of videos I talked about how complicated lighting can be, and I'm just going to be covering some very basics today. So yeah, let's just get into it. So from before, we're just going to add a floor, like I was talking about before, because the difference between adding a floor and adding a plane is that a floor it goes on forever, whereas a plane does not. So I always just add a floor because it's simpler. So now if I just render this out, we just have a floor. And remember, the shortcut for rendering just inside this viewport is Control R, and if you want to render to the picture viewer, it is Shift R. So now we have a floor. Let's just drop in a object, let's just say a cube, and let's just bring it to a decent position, to 100 here. So now I have a floor and we have a cube. So let's just drop some materials on these now. And so also just bear in mind as well when you're talking about lighting, lighting isn't the only, although light is important to lighting obviously, but there are also other things that are going to affect your lighting in the scene. So for example, if you add any reflectance to any materials that you add to objects, then that's also going to make a big impact on the scene, and I'll show you what that kind of looks like now. So let's just make a new material. So remember, double click is the shortcut to create a new material. So we're going to make 2 of them really quickly. Double click on one of them to go into editing. And what we're going to do is we're going to make a, let's make it a bit darker actually, let's make a nice green color here. Okay, and this might look different for you depending on which version of Cinema 4D you are in, but you should be able to figure this out. So you just go into reflectance, and then you just want to add a layer. So if you're in earlier versions, I believe it's just called reflection, and then it should just be there by default. The legacy version is what your guys will appear as, but yeah, so we're just going to add a Beckman. And what we're going to do is we're going to add what's called a Fresnel. So that's what the point of this is. So we're just going to add what's called a dielectric Fresnel and just turn this to 1.5. Now in later videos I might explain what all this stuff is, but for right now, just don't worry about it. This is just going to be me just kind of showing you, like, just more or less proving a point right now. So here we go. So now we have just a basic reflection on a basic colored material. So we're just going to apply this material to the cube, and we're just going to do the same thing for this. Let's make this a nice kind of bright blue color, and we're just going to do the same thing. So add a Beckman in the reflectance, and we're going to go down to layer for now, dielectric, and let's say 1.5 as well. And we're going to apply this texture to the ground. So there we go. So now if we render this out, that's what we have. So with the default lighting that's set up right off the bat with the scene, everything is just lit perfectly even. There's no shadows, it's just there's a couple of reflections and that's it. The second that you add a light, you can see your scene instantly gets dark, and that's because it's giving you a live preview of what will be visible in the renderer. So if I render this out right now, it's just black as it is in the preview here. So we're going to click on our light, and there's many different types of lights, by the way. So there's light, there's a spotlight, which means you can put it, and actually, you know what, I'll just go through and I'll show you what all these different ones do here. So we have a basic light now, so if I drag it out here, as you can see, now it gives you kind of a direction with the rays and stuff. You can see that now this will be visible, so if I render this out again, we now have one side being visible in the render. But now, since this is 3D, we have the advantage of being able to do this. Now we can see both sides. And just wherever you move it, it will update live. So let's just pull this up, and now we can see the background a bit, or the floor rather. And now if I run this out, we can now see the whole scene again. But as you notice, because we now have an actual light in the room instead of having what was called ambient light, which we had before, the reflection off of the bottom and the reflection off the top here is actually leaving an imprint on the color along the sides here. So now it's getting this green is becoming a bit blue. That's kind of going to be a more advanced concept, but I just kind of want you guys to kind of be aware of that, just when you're making things, because it can be a really cool effect that you can add. So that is the basic light. I'm now just going to turn that off so that we can't see that, and now I'm going to add a spotlight. And so spotlights are kind of exactly what they sound like. They are a light that operates within a spot. So this is the spot, this cone is going to be considered the spot of the light here. So if I make it wider by clicking and dragging on this, then it will widen up the amount that's visible. If I make it longer, then it will make it so that the visibility is better further away. And you can just play around with this sort of stuff. You can also change the angle and whatever. But as you'll notice, when you move it around, it stays exactly pointed to where it was before. So how do I make it so that it targets this cube? Well, there's a couple of ways of doing it, and one of them is you can add a target light if you wanted to. But the faster way of doing this is just to right-click this light here. Go to Cinema 4D tags as you right-click, and there's a whole bunch of different tags in here. The one that we care about right now, though, is the target tag. And so with it highlighted, you'll see it says target object. We just dropped a cube in there. And there we go. Now it's targeted at a cube. So what does that mean? Now, if I move this somewhere, you know, in and out, it's facing the same way. But now if I move it up, it'll also give it an angle so that it's always facing the cube. So you can get like a nice perspective on it. And if I render that out, render that out, that's what it looks like now. So that's the spotlight. I wouldn't really worry too much about the target light. Again, you can just do a spotlight and put a target on it. It's not that big of a deal. Now we have an area light. So the area light is basically just like a regular light, except for it is a square. And there's different good and bad things about this one. It lights a bit more evenly. If you imagine that there's like a whole array of a whole bunch of those lights just in this one box here, that's essentially what this area light is. But with every light, you can change the typing in here. So if you want to change it to, for example, a square parallel spot, now you have essentially a spotlight that is perfectly square. As you can see there with the pattern that's going on, it's a perfectly square spotlight now. But yeah, area lights, the biggest thing that they're going to be used for is what's called volumetric lighting, which I'm not going to even start beginning to touch in this video. That's going to be definitely for a later video. But yeah, there you go. That's kind of what it looks like. The other thing that's interesting about spotlights as well is, area lights as well, is that where the line terminates. So it's terminating right now here. So that's where this line is actually lining up against. Let me just show you what I mean. If I drew a straight line from here down, what's going to happen is there's going to be no light being produced there. That's why you're seeing this shadow here. The light's being produced on either side of the square. So that's just one thing to keep in mind if you're going to be using a area light. Now, we also have IES lighting. IES lighting is a bit more complicated. I'll probably go into it in a different video. Infinite light is kind of what you get at the beginning of Cinema 4D, or when you first open a project in Cinema 4D. The light's just infinite. Yeah, I don't really know how else to say it. It's basically just infinitely coming out from the axis at this point is what this light is doing. I don't really use it for anything. I wouldn't really worry too much about it. It's not very important. And it's also sunlight, which you can get some cool effects with sunlight. I'm not a big fan. I don't use it very often. I normally just set up my own objects and then make it a virtual sun later, so I wouldn't worry too much about this one. Again, it's not very useful. But it is there if you want to play around with it. The other way that you can light scenes as well is there's a thing called HDRIs, but there's also another one called the physical sky, which is built into Cinema 4D. And so let's just drop a physical sky on this for a second, and you'll see it kind of has this orangey tinge to it now. So if I render this out, we have actual shadows being properly made, and we have this kind of nice even lighting. And so what physical sky does is it basically sets up a fake sky. So there's a fake sun right there. That's why it's super bright over there, and you can kind of see the reflection of it down here in the plane. It creates a fake sun, and it creates a fake lighting environment inside of Cinema 4D that you can use to light your scene. Now the cool thing about it as well is that along with being able to change the presets, you can also change the time and location. So if you want something like the sun at 10 a.m. or 9 a.m. let's say, or even earlier, like sometime around, like just as the sun's starting to rise, you want to get that kind of a color, you just set it to, I don't know, 840 for example, and now you have the same light environment, but you have a different sun color. And I mean, there's also this different presets as well. There's a couple of cool ones. Blushing Winter is a really cool one if you want to do anything that's going to be like, I used it for a log cabin the other day. It's pretty cool. I like it. It's a fun one to use, a fun one to mess around with. There's also there's plenty of good ones in here. You also have like these ones as well, which are a bit more nuts, a bit more pastel, if you want to say that sort of a color, and they can all add different cool effects. But yeah, I just want to make you guys aware of that. That's a pretty cool thing to use. The other thing that you can do as well, if you wanted to make shadows but you wanted to use your own lighting, is if I turn these lights back on for a second so that you can see them. The other thing you can do is if you go into light and then go into general, there's a section here just below typing that is called these shadows. You can change the different types of shadow. Ray traced hard means that it's going to be a very hard shadow. It's going to be very, very defined. This would work really well if you're going to do something that's going to be grayscale. That would look pretty cool on there. There's also soft shadows, which are feathered at the edges. And then there's also area shadows, which are a bit more granular, but still not very realistic. And there's ways to fix this. One of the biggest ways is by using something called global illumination or ambient in conjunction with ambient occlusion in your render settings. But right now we're not going to worry about that. That's just how you set up basic shadows. Just hit shadows down here. There you are. You have a basic shadow. Cut and dry, pretty simple. One more cool thing I want to show you, and I wish I could say I understood it fully, at least as far as what it's doing, is the fall off. So the fall off is really cool. What I do oftentimes, I set it to inverse squared, and so what that does, it just has a cool effect. If I just bring this down, you can grab it. It's kind of like having a light that's in like a sphere almost, like you can see how it affects the scene. This can just provide a really cool effect and oftentimes a lot more realistic shadows. So like having that right there, for example, that provides a really cool scene and a really cool form of lighting. I just wanted to make you guys aware of that as well. That's another cool way to add a bit more dynamic, to make your renders a bit more dynamic when you're first starting out as well, because a lot of people don't know about that. That's just a really cool thing that you're able to do. Also, you can in fact change the color of the lights as well if you so wish to. For example, if you wanted to make this more of a warm scene, then obviously you set it to like an orangey color and then start dialing it in a bit. If I render that out now, it's going to be a bit orangey. If I wanted to make it a really cool scene, then I bring it to the blues, do that, and then there you go, it's more blue. Yeah, I guess that's kind of the main basics for lighting. I'm also just going to quickly talk about HDRIs as well, because along with the reflections, you can actually add, with that physical sky where I was talking about setting up a fake sky, you can also add these things called HDRIs. And so the simplest way to explain them is if I just put a sky in and make a material, and then you can get these online. If you just type in free HDRIs, you'll be able to find them for sure. I have some in the preset library that I set up that I was talking about in the previous video, HDRI. So I'm just going to drop one of these into here. So you just drag, for me, I can just drag and drop it in here. But for you, you just have to hit texture and then go load texture, and you'd load the image that you wanted to use for that. So let's just apply this texture to the sky. And now, if I render it out, you'll see we now have the sky is actually this HDRI image. And I don't think I can actually open the image because it's a .hdr file, but if you look at it, you can kind of get the idea of what it does. It just basically takes a big image and fakes the lighting that was used when the image was taken. And you can get a really cool effect. Like, you can get some really cool stuff going on, as you can see there. Like if I wanted to add a whole bunch of blur to this, for example, which will slow down my my render times by quite a bit, guys. So just be prepared. It might take me a bit to render this out now. But let's just blur it and re-render this back out. And now you can have like a really cool effect going on where it's like reflecting off of the sky really roughly. And yeah, I just wanted to make you guys aware of that. You can look up more about HDRs if you want in your own time, but for this video, that's pretty much just as in depth as I'll get into them. Unfortunately, with a lot of 3D modeling stuff, it's going to be a lot of your own reading and a lot of looking into other resources online. That's definitely the best way that I've found to learn stuff. But yeah, another thing that I wanted to cover really quickly is, so the different types of lighting that you're going to need. So I would, for example, for me personally, I wouldn't use an HDR if I was just dealing with a single object. So if I was dealing with a single object, I wouldn't even have a sky. I would just have the floor plane and then whatever the object was itself. So if I'm just going to turn off the reflectance as well there. Maybe turn down the specular strength as well a little bit. So if I was just going to be lighting this one object was my object of importance. And in fact, actually, I have a image that I made the other day that I can talk about this with. Give me 1 second here. This image right here. So actually, in fact, it's almost the exact same color. If I have this one object in the main thing here, I'm not going to have a full sky scene to light up all the background and whatever, because the background's not very important. It's just adding some contrast in this case. The important part is the main centerpiece here. So I'm going to try and light this main centerpiece as much as I possibly can. Same thing with, like, even with this, which I made it a while ago as well. It's the same thing. There's a single light on the main piece of importance, and the background is pretty much irrelevant. It's just there to serve like a nice shadow in the background. I could have, in fact, not even had this background. It would have been perfectly fine. Same thing with like this, which is another one that I made a while ago. It's all being lit individually. There's no skies here. Now, what I would use a sky for is if I had something like, sorry, just give me 1 second here. If I had something like this, in fact, this was lit with the sky. This is a piece that I did a while ago. Let me get the better version of this. There we go. That's the better version of this. Oh no, did this open individual tabs? No, didn't. Okay, cool. So this is a piece that I did a while ago, and this is actually being lit by a physical sky and a couple of individuals lights as well. But what I'm trying to get at here is that when you're lighting an individual you have to kind of pick what your lighting is going to be before you make your scene. So for me, for example, for this scene, if I was planning on lighting just this one object to make it look kind of cool, the way that I would want to do that is I want to really single out the individual object itself. So to single out the object itself, the best way to do that is to create lighting that's specifically designed to fall off in the background. And so let me just show you what I mean. So let's just make this a soft shadow with, again, the inverse squared thing. We're going to draw this down. So now we have this face being lit and this top face being lit. Now we have this front corner being lit, like all of this section around here, and now we have the front section being lit. So all of the important areas of it are being lit now. Everything that I want to emphasize in this is now being lit. So now when I render it out, as you can see, everything that I want to be emphasized is being emphasized. The actual object itself is being emphasized. Nobody cares about the background. The background's irrelevant. But what's being emphasized is the cube itself, which for an individual object render is what you really want. So you want to have individual lighting that focuses specifically on what you're going to be working on. Now in this case also, one of the things I was talking about earlier, where I was talking about adding reflectance onto here, is because this also makes a really nice little color across here on the green of this as it reflects off of here. So that's another thing you can look at as well. It's messing around with having reflectance on different colors so that they start seeping into whatever object you have in the center here. Going back to that reference image. Give me 1 second. This one. As you can see, actually the blue is starting to reflect off of this internally and add a bit more contrast to it when you're looking at the whole thing. So you can definitely use your floor plane to your advantage as well, if you want to. I mean, it's up to you, but it's something you can consider as well when you're making something like this. The other sorts of scenes that I deal a lot with and that I can talk about besides single object renders is environments. So let's say you have something like this. So you're dealing with a full environment now, and I know this is not a very good model. I apologize. I kind of just have a camera set up here as well. I know this is not a great model, but this is just kind of something that I can like quickly to make a point. So now for this, the backdrop I kind of want to be more or less the same, but the issue is this is dropping below the axis, so I don't really want to have a floor plane here. Otherwise what it's going to do is it's going to cut it off. So let me show you what I mean. So if I drop a floor in here, render this out now, all you can see is the top port. But I want you to be able to see everything. So I could drop it down, I guess, technically, and just do that if I wanted to. But also what I can do is something that I don't use very often, is I can add a background. Let's just delete the floor, have a background, and let's just get that same blue color, because why not? And now, there we go. We now have a very simple background. If you're wondering what these bars are on the side, this is because this part isn't being rendered, because it's just the background to the image. The actual image itself is just being captured in here because I have an 800 by 600 window. This is not actually part of the render. If I change this to for a second here, just to prove my point. Now if I render it out, the entire thing will be blue. So yeah, this is a pretty fast way of just making sure that you have a universal background on something if you wanted to have an entire scene like this. But this has nothing to do with lighting at all. This is just talking about the background. So let's talk about the lighting. So let's go back to that physical sky, for example, that I was talking about. So now we have a physical sky. Let's try, well, first you have to decide what you want for this scene. So let's say I want a sunrise scene. And, but the problem with this is that the physical sky is lighting this side instead of this side. So I mean, I could go in and go time and location and start changing the time and location around if I wanted to, but now I'm getting like different colors and stuff that I might not want. But let's just see. Let's just render it out and see what we get. Give me a second. There we go. Yeah, we're getting like a pretty decent thing going on, but again, this side's still not quite lit, so let's go back to 7. Oh. But now we have a problem where it's now dark. So it just can't light up this side, which is really annoying. I want this side to be lit up. So let's say I want that side to be lit up. What we can do is let's go back to our 11 o'clock. I can actually rotate the entire sky. So if you just come up here and click on the rotate button, this will pop up. And because I just want to rotate it so that it spins this way around, if I was looking at it from the top down perspective, I want it to spin this way so that this sun is facing on this side instead of this side. Just click and drag. And there we go. Now the sun is on this side. Now if I render this out, we have a nice looking scene here. But this background again is kind of boring. So maybe let's drop our original background in. As you'll see, it doesn't actually pop up, and the reason for that is because I completely forgot. This background is actually just going to be a background for whatever you cannot see. So now would be a good time to use the floor and not use the background, because this background will only appear wherever there's nothing. And in this instance, there's actually a physical sky in the way, so you can't actually see the background at all. So yeah, let's delete the background and let's drop a floor in. And we're just gonna move this floor down. And let's drop a color on. Now we'll render this out. Beautiful. We now have a nice blue thing. Yeah, again, you can mess around with, if you want to mess around with some reflectance on here, then you could probably try and reflect some light up onto it, I guess, if you wanted to. If you want to see the reflection of it in there, I guess, as well. Yeah, you guys can kind of mess around with that. This is, again, just about lighting, more specifically, but the main points that I wanted to get across with this is that you can, for bigger scenes like this, it might not be a terrible idea to look at global forms of lighting, so like the physical sky, or doing that HDR studio even that I was talking about. So let's do that as well. I'm just going to jump back to that original window really quickly just to grab that HDR material. And just go back, go back to here. Okay, And let's put the material on the sky now. Let's turn off the physical sky. And just render it out. And now we have a more even light for that. So that might not even be a terrible idea. In fact, this actually doesn't look too bad. I don't mind that at all. So, yeah, I think the thing is, there's many different lighting techniques, and honestly, I might even try and do an entire series on doing different lighting techniques and talking about different things. You can even, one of the ones I didn't mention, but I'm going to quickly try and whip something up on the spot now that I'm thinking about it, is you can also actually make the objects themselves be the light source. Yeah, so the way that you can do this, I'm just trying to think of the best way to do this, is there's actually a channel in here called the luminance channel. So if you check mark that on, you'll see it becomes bright white. Now if I drop this on here and I drop a floor in, for example, and just render this out, it's kind of hard to see. Let me add a bit of reflection to the floor. Let's just make that same stock material that I'm known for now. Oh, sorry, I was on the wrong channel there. So yeah, there we go. Add that. Reflection with a Beckman and dielectric. Strap that on there. So as you can see, the cube itself is actually lighting itself, because again, when you drop a light in, the default lighting in Cinema 4D turns off. So this is actually lighting the scene itself entirely. So like if I add a cube next to it, and make it like a bit smaller and whatever, a bit more dainty. And I add this cube next to it. Just offset it randomly. As you can see, it's actually lighting the cube, because you can see the light under there. It's actually lighting the cube from this cube. So that's another thing you can do as well, is you can mess around with the luminance channel to create a effect on the cube, or on an object rather. Use an object to light your scene, or you can also do glow. Glow is the other one you can do as well to do the exact same thing. So if you add a glow, it will do exactly the same thing. It will glow. Okay, so yeah, hopefully there was something in there that was valuable at least, and worth your time watching. If there was, then be sure to give it a like, and check out the rest of the videos. There's going to be a playlist on my channel, again, for all the beginner tutorials. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Hope you guys learned something. And yeah, I guess I will hopefully see you guys next one.